Hello and welcome. You're with us here on Business Today. I'm Abha Bakaya. Here are the day's top stories. The 5G era has dawned in India, but implementation will take time, says Rajeev Chandrasekhar, Union Minister of State for IT and Electronics, in an exclusive conversation with Siddharth Zarabi. The much anticipated and crucial free trade agreement between India and UK could be in trouble. Reports say that comments by the British Home Secretary could derail the proposed Diwali visit by Prime Minister Modi to England. Nervousness persists on the Lal Street as investors keep an eye on US inflation figures. Sensex down 391 points. Nifty manages to close above the 17,000 level. Infosys beats street estimates by posting a 12% sequential rise in net profit. Board approves a $93 billion share buyback. It's a big bang end to the IT results season. Indian auto industry speeds past the COVID speed breakers. Car sales at a record high in the first half of this financial year. Companies eye record festival season sales. Even tax authorities segregate between the parantha and the humble chapati. Packaged paranthas to attract 18% GST versus 5% for the chapati. But first, the big news today, Singapore Airlines has said it is in talks with the Tata Group about a potential merger of Vistara and Air India. Vistara is a joint venture of Singapore Airlines and Tata's, and its mergers with Air India will give the new airline the heft to compete with the likes of Indigo. While Air India has an 8.5% market share, Vistara has a larger 9.7% market share, and the combined airline will have a fleet of 178 wide and narrow body aircraft. Let's go across to Chetan Bhutani, who's taking a closer look at the implications of this merger. Early days yet, Chetan, but what are you picking up?
Well, that's it, Abha. Early days, as you correctly pointed out, Singapore Airlines is indeed in talks, confidential talks with Tata Group about a potential merger of their joint venture airline Vistara with Air India, which will give the Singapore airline a big boost and a big hold in South Asia market. However, why is this news important? Please understand, you need to understand that Tata's would have a solid partner through Air India, and of course, it would of course have be a great boost for its global operations. Singapore Airlines, however, operates a fleet of 147 Airbus and Boeing aircraft, passenger aircrafts, and of course 8 freighters. However, the merged synergies would of course be a great news for the Indian flyers as well. But yes, Air India and Singapore Airlines and Vistara, of course, would enjoy a higher market share in India as well. So, however, this is just a regulatory filing to inform investors and other parties. And of course, no definitive terms have been signed upon or agreed upon by the concerned parties. Of course, they would definitely, if they agree, they would have to definitely go through the regulatory approvals in India as well. So clearly, in times to come, we can expect this development. But yes, in times to come, Air India could definitely have a good operation, and Tata's could possibly have a higher market share in times to come.
All right, Chetan, thanks so much for joining us with all the details that we currently have. Exciting times for the aviation space. IT bellwether Infosys delivered a strong performance, beating street expectations with a 12% sequential rise in consolidated net profit. Consolidated revenue grew by 6% to 365 billion rupees. The company board has approved a 93 billion rupee share buyback at 1,850 rupees per share, a 30% premium to the closing price of 1,420 rupees. Infosys also announced an interim dividend of 16.5 rupees per share. While the sales guidance for the fiscal has been raised by a percentage point, the margin guidance has been cut by a similar amount. The company says it's won $2.7 billion of large deals in the quarter. Its attrition rate has fallen by 130 basis points on quarter to 27.1%. It has meanwhile emerged that Infosys has also fired moonlighters in the last 12 months because of confidentiality issues when found working for 2 companies. The revelation comes after its rival Wipro announced that it had fired 300 employees found working simultaneously for competitors.
Now, for gig opportunities in the external environment, we support the aspirations of our employees to learn beyond their work. We will support them to work on certain gig projects after the prior approval of the managers. We are also developing more comprehensive policies for that, while ensuring contractual and confidentiality commitments are fully respected. However, to be clear, we do not support dual employment. If we have found in the past, if the employees who are doing blatant work in two specific companies where there's confidentiality issues, we have let go of them. In the last 12 months, but I don't have the data. But we can certainly get it to you.
Benchmark indices ended lower today as investors chose to remain on the sidelines ahead of the crucial US inflation data for September, which was released after trading hours in India. The Nifty 50 struggled to sustain above the key psychological level of 17,000 points through the session on account of a decline in select information technology and financial names. However, the index did manage to end at 17,014, down 109 points. The BSE Sensex closed down close to 400 points at 57,235. Among the Nifty 50 stocks, HCL Tech led the rally after better than expected numbers. Others on the gainers list, Sun Pharma, Coal India, Dr. Reddy's and Tata Motors. The losers were led by Wipro, which shed more than 7% of its value after a disappointing July to September quarter. Adani Ports, State Bank of India, SBI Life Insurance and ICICI Bank were some of the other big losers today. The proposed free trade agreement between India and the United Kingdom has run into trouble. The deal, which was expected to be signed by Diwali, is now hanging by a thread thanks to indiscreet and perhaps deliberate comments by Britain's Home Secretary, the 42-year-old Indian origin Suella Braverman.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi, currently on an overdrive flagging of trains and schemes before the Assembly election model, Code of Conduct kicks in, was expected to head to United Kingdom in the fourth week of this month. He was expected to oversee the signing of the much-anticipated free trade agreement between the two countries, a pact that former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson had pushed for. However, comments by the British Home Secretary Suella Braverman may have poured cold water on the deal. The Indian origin politician, whose parents moved to England from Kenya and Mauritius in the 1960s, has been panned for her comments. In an interview to a magazine, she said that Indian migrants are the largest group overstaying in the UK. She added that despite the British government reaching an agreement with India last year, the problem has not abated. She reportedly is not very thrilled either about the fact that the trade agreement may include easier movement of Indian professionals to the UK as part of the deal. The comments were preceded by her statement at the Conservative Party conference, where many saw her blaming the Indian community for recent unrest in Leicester.
The unexamined drive towards multiculturalism as an end in itself, combined with the corrosive aspects of identity politics, has led us astray. I saw this when I went to Leicester recently, a melting pot of cultures and a beacon of religious harmony. But even there, riots and civil disorder have taken place because of failures to integrate large numbers of newcomers.
The External Affairs Ministry was quick to respond, saying India was taking all steps to facilitate the return of citizens who are allegedly overstaying in the UK. The MEA also made it clear that such comments were not appropriate given that trade negotiations were underway. Indian officials are shocked and disappointed by the disrespectful remarks of Braverman, adding that perhaps the ambitious politician was currying favour with the Brexit lobby.
That was the policy of the government.
Meanwhile, the British Home Secretary's bravado has attracted a lot of criticism within the UK. The British economy is currently facing a tough time, with inflation at around 10% and energy prices posing a very real threat to the country's citizens. There have been efforts by the Liz Truss government to undo the damage, with the British Foreign Minister James Cleverly reiterating earlier today that his country wanted an even stronger trade relationship with India. But at this stage, it is clear that only a miracle would ensure that the India-UK FTA, which would have reduced tariffs and non-tariff barriers for trade between the two countries, will be signed by Diwali. Even if it is, expect a watered-down version initially. Bureau Report, Business Today Television.
Let's go across to Lavina on this. Lavina, talk to us about what really is happening, what either side wants and why this is hanging in the balance.
It is just going to be speculation to predict whether the Diwali deadline will be met for the free trade deal. But if the information coming through the insiders and the officials is to be believed, there could be some kind of statement that might come through for sure before or by the end of October, just to show that the deadline, one is aware of the deadline. Now, as far as the UK crisis is concerned and what this deal means for the UK, it means quite a lot on two grounds. Number one, for Brexiteers, it is the most important moment to say, see, we said that we are free to do great trade deals. This is one of them. India being a proven democracy, we have a long-standing relationship with the country. It is a great market and we have come up with this great deal. Whether it is great or not, we shall have to wait and see. But that is a big win. It is also a great win for Liz Truss, that whose cabinet, whose governance has been put to question with a kind of crisis that the country is going through. It already was going through a cost of living crisis, with energy crisis, and with her coming and not raising the taxes and giving the kind of tax relief, it sent the markets in a downward spiral. The pound has suffered. Bank of England had to come to the rescue. Markets are really spiraling down. So that is a big, good, happy moment that she needs, and she was part of it when the deal was started, when Boris Johnson was part of the cabinet, and he wanted this piece of cake, or rather the crown jewel. So the deal, for various reasons, is quite important for the UK.
All right, Lavina, thanks for taking us through that. Now, it's been a record-setting first half of the fiscal for the auto sector. According to numbers released this morning, passenger vehicle sales hit a new high of 19.5 lakh units in the April to September period. Commercial vehicle sales in the period rose by 68% over the previous year, while the two-wheeler segment recovered by 28%. Some of the big highlights, as pointed out by the industry group SIAM, festive season sales are expected to set new highs. Raw material costs are going down but are still higher than their pre-COVID levels. Inflation is hurting sales of entry-level two-wheelers, and there's been a considerable improvement in semiconductor supplies. CNG car sales have also fallen due to costlier fuel, and exports are not doing well as the domestic market. The International Monetary Fund had some high words of praise for India's direct cash transfer scheme. In a press briefing, the IMF's Fiscal Affairs Department hailed the scheme as a logistical marvel and said it's being studied for wider implementation.
If I look at the case of India, it is actually quite impressive. In fact, just because of the sheer size of the country, it's a logistical marvel how these programs that seek to help people who are at low income levels reach literally hundreds of millions of people. There are programs that target specifically women. There are programs that target the elderly, farmers. Perhaps the interesting part is that in these examples, there's a lot of technological innovation. In the case of India, one thing that is striking is the use of the unique identification system, the Aadhaar.
We have in FAD a very ambitious program of application of new technologies and digitalization to public administration. We call that GovTech, and we're collaborating with India in that context as one of the most inspiring examples of the application of technology to solve very complicated issues of targeting support to the people who need it most.
While the era of 5G has dawned in India, it will be a 5G-less Diwali for those with some of the most expensive mobile handsets in the country. Business Today TV's managing editor Siddharth Zarabi spoke to Rajeev Chandrasekhar, MOS Electronics and IT, about the delay in the 5G rollout. Listen into that conversation.
The big question that everyone is asking, where is my 5G signal? Handset mein signal nahi hai, network mein signal nahi hai. What really is happening? I ask you this as the person who got the first mobile phone call up in India.
Look, you know, I've done this many times in my life, and we must not underestimate the degree of difficulty in rolling out nationwide brand new technology and brand new infrastructure. So I think this is not a game about instant gratification that you launch it and then you suddenly have you know, through a snap of a finger or a miracle, suddenly 5G services available all around the country. The companies that are involved, the Jios and the Airtels and the Vodafones of the world, are going to build these networks, and this process usually almost always takes a little bit of time. There is a process of installing the equipment, there is a process of testing the equipment, there is sophisticated radio engineering involved in you know, dimensioning these cells and these cellular networks. So I think we would be patient, we should be patient. It is clear that the 5G era has dawned in India, that there will be some time before 5G is available uniformly at the same level and the same quality across the country. It will take some time, and that is just part of how wireless networks are rolled out.
Some people, and we've been running polls and getting feedback, and I'm just posing a couple of questions from them. The first said that then why did the networks say that they are going live with 5G if the handset and the network was not prepared? Is that a fair question to ask?
No, I think when you say, when the country says that we have entered 5G, the day you auction 5G spectrum and you allocate the 5G spectrum, the government's role is more or less done.
Yes.
And then it is for the private companies to roll these networks out. So for all practical purposes, the government has done what it has to do in terms of enabling the 5G ecosystem and the 5G providers to provide these services. Like I said, it is reasonably commonsensical to understand that these networks don't get built out overnight. It's not a question of just switching from 2G to 3G or 3G to 4G and then 4G to 5G. These are very new pieces of equipment that have to be added to the current networks. There are testing issues and there are characterization issues. I am not an operator anymore, but I can tell you that if I was, I would still be taking considerable amount of time to roll the networks out and make them available as a pan-Indian service. So the government of India has effectively announced that we are in the 5G era. We have auctioned the spectrum, we've allocated the spectrum, and now, as you heard on the day, all three operators gave differing timelines in terms of when they will be rolling out the networks. I personally believe there is a built-in incentive for all of these operators to roll out fast and accelerate the rollout, because the companies that do get the first 5G customers tend to be the guys who will get the second and the third and the fourth. So there is a built-in incentive for all of them to run fast and get these services out there as early and as quickly as possible.
Another question that is being asked by most people is that why did the operators, perhaps not directly, the impression that got created was 5G Diwali hone wali hai. Because those were the announcement in some ways.
So these questions are better posed to the operators, not to me.
We are trying, I can assure you.
And frankly, I as a minister in METI, my limited or my deep interest in 5G arises from the innovation ecosystem the 5G catalyzes, and the fact that the internet teledensity, the internet penetration, will also get an accelerated view.
I really want you to tell our viewers two more points, but before I go there, another element. The networks are doing what they have to do. But I find it a little strange that Apple says that they can release a software patch only in December. Samsung says it can do so by November. Were they caught unprepared? Didn't they believe that India would pull off a quick 5G auction?
Again, I think that question is better posed to Apple and Samsung. But I think that maybe we have basically exceeded expectations of countries that were looking at this rollout being slightly further into the future. And maybe that is the case that Apple and Samsung are responding as they have. But again, from my knowledge and experience of the telecom sector, I think the expectation that a new technology, once the auction is complete and the spectrum is allocated, in a matter of 15 days will turn on live service is a bit unrealistic, to put it very politely. Since you're asking the question, I have to be polite. But to understand that this is a network rollout, and a rollout of this kind of scale and magnitude and of a new technology does take time. So perhaps the Apples and the Samsungs were taken aback by the speed at which we have moved. You know, the conventional wisdom was that you have a delay for a spectrum auction, and then you have an extraordinary amount of delay before the spectrum is
allocation. Yes.
So nobody probably understood that this is new India, and all of these things happen fut. And it is quite possible.
Don't move at the old pace.
Yeah. So it is quite possible that the device companies were a little taken aback by the speed at which India has moved and the speed at which new India is moving. But that is the new normal, that the government moves very fast under Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji. We make it very, very much our business to enable the private sector and the startup ecosystems to do their thing as quickly as possible.
One of the interesting things that he spoke about was the fact that this global semiconductor shortage seems to be easing. What's your sense? Because I have realized that semiconductors have now moved outside of drawing rooms to other people. They're saying, "Gaadi delay ho gayi, semiconductor issue."
No, so I think our semiconductor ambitions and our vision and our goal of our Prime Minister was never aimed at the short-term issues of the supply chain disruptions of 2020, 2021 on semiconductors and electronics. So that was not our play at all. The Honorable Prime Minister's vision of semiconductors is a much more deeper view, which he articulated in February 2022 at the World Economic Forum. He understood in 2021 that the global value chains, the supply chains around electronics and semiconductors are shifting. And into those supply chains, a new ask from the consuming nations of the world was emerging. The ask is of trusted value chains, trusted supply chains. And I think India's position is a position that addresses the need for the world to have trusted value chains in electronics and semiconductors. We have established over the last 2 decades that we are trusted partners in most things technology services. We are now demonstrating in the last 4 years our serious momentum in electronics manufacturing, and as you know, just in the month of September, the first time in the history of India, we have exported $1 billion of electronics in 1 month alone, in September of 2022. Wow. So our momentum on that, and we want to get to $300 billion in 2025, that's a target the Honorable Prime Minister has given us, of which $120 billion will be exports. Just understand this, that in 2014 we had 0 exports in electronics, and in 2025 we will do 120 billion. In 2014 we imported 90% of all handsets made in India, and in 2022 we manufactured 97% of our handsets consumed in India. That is, in a sense, fueling our ambition and making us reimagine our future. So in that context, semiconductor manufacture, semiconductor design, innovation, and the company you mentioned, Qualcomm, recently celebrated its 100th device design in India, the 100th tape out of devices that they have designed in India. So if Qualcomm is doing it, and other companies like Intel, AMD, and so many other companies in the country are doing it, I think there is a strong argument that that momentum, that talent can be now harnessed to creating a significant presence for India in the global value chains of semiconductors, in manufacturing, in testing, and designing devices of the future. So that is where we are, that is our position, that is our sweet spot, and it is not in competition to the US or Europe or Japan or Korea. I think we have identified our own destiny and journey, and it is a journey that we will certainly be fulfilling over the coming years.
There have been headline-grabbing investment announcements by Intel, for example, in the United States, and there is now a local semiconductor push in the most advanced economies. We've also had a Vedanta announcement. Where does that part of the specific effort which you yourself have been involved in stand today? Would it be fair to say that we are perhaps moving a little slower than public expectation?
No. Again, like I said, 2014 we were nothing in electronics, and today we are fast emerging as a credible alternate to the traditional basis of manufacturing electronics, and we have an ambition of $300 billion in 2025. We are at $75–80 billion today. It took us 6 years to reach here. So semiconductors and semiconductors ecosystem doesn't get built overnight. It is a direction that Prime Minister has embarked our nation on. It is planning for the future. It is planning for India's decade. And therefore, I will certainly go out on a limb today and tell you that over the next 3–4 years, you will see that India is slowly but surely emerging.
A made in India chipset?
As a participant in the semiconductor manufacturing ecosystem of the world, as well as certainly design innovations coming from India, that the next generation of devices will be either co-developed by Indian startups or developed by Indian startups.
And that's where we leave it on the show tonight. Thanks so much for watching.